So as Dom said, last time we were here was 4 years ago. So we've released 13 kind of minor versions of Preside. In each of the versions, we kind of added a few new features. A lot of them having bug fixes and performance increases and things like this. But and a lot of features that have been added into Preside are just magically there when you install. But there are a few ones which you've got to add some settings before they're enabled. So I'm just going to go through these. Some of these you're going to know, some of these you're not going to know, some of these you may know, but you may not know some of the things it can do. So so that's what the purpose of this is. I'm hoping to keep it out about 40 minutes. So if I go straight on. So the first one, Form Builder V2. So this is going back now. This is August 2020, if anyone can remember that. So I don't know if anyone still uses Form Builder V1 or everyone has upgraded. So this is a switch that you have to add into the settings to enable Form Builder V2.
No, the default isn't done.
Okay. So basically with Form Builder V2, instead of being a form, and every time we create the form, you add the questions and build up the questions. In Form Builder V2, you have a bank of questions which you can reuse in multiple forms. So as you see in here, I've got a whole bunch of this video playing. It is. So I've got here a number of questions that I've added. So these are questions, and as you drag and drop a field type over, you'll then get presented with a question that you can select from, or you can then create another question from it. And then with each of those different field types, there's all the validation, all those kind of things. So if you're using something like an email address, you can just create that once, and then you can drop that into multiple forms. So it saves an awful lot of time if you're creating lots and lots of Preside forms. So here I'm adding a date of birth. So I'm creating this question, and then you can then drag that that date of birth field into any form. So one of the good things, and the video will move on to this in a minute, is then how you can use that data. So it doesn't just speed up the idea of how quickly you can create forms, but then the querying side of things. So if previously, if you wanted to say, has someone completed a form? So maybe there's a white paper that you've got hidden away on your website, and you've got an access rule that says you can only access this page or download this asset if you completed this particular form. And you've added that as a condition on the page. Previously, the only control you had as an expression was, has this person completed the form? That was all you could do. But with Form Builder V2, you can be specific on a question. So you could create an email to send someone and says, if someone has answered this particular answer to this particular question in this particular form, then that's my segment that I want to send them an email for. So you've probably seen this similar when you went through the booking flow in Eventfolio for your CF Camp ticket, where we asked custom questions. This was kind of an expansion of what we do in our events platform. So so here, for example, I've got a custom expression about if this person has answered a particular question. So yeah, so lots of new rules expressions that you can then use to really fine tune the kind of the use of those form builds. Anyway, that's kind of it. We'll move on to the next one. That's pretty much it anyway. No. Oh, it's annoying. Right. Okay, next one, saving filters. So again, this is still back in our 10.12 release, I think. So again, filters, incredibly, as everyone knows, incredibly powerful, incredibly useful. They're kind of the center point of everything that's really about Preside. Now, what you could do is, hang on. Talking Yeah, actually, we're talking exporting filters here. So I'll come back to the base filters in a minute. So basically, in any data manager field, you can export data. You all know this, and it's immediate. So we have a download now button, and that's all we can do. So you create your filter, you download your data, you pick your fields, and that was kind of how it's worked for a long time. Now, in this version of Preside, what you could do is start to schedule that. So the good thing about the scheduling data is that if you've got a particularly complicated expression or huge amount of data that you want to export, we had a number of clients that would want to say, for example, export all of their contacts on during, hundreds of thousands of contacts during kind of office hours, and it could have impacting on, performance of the site and stuff like that. So with the scheduled export, what you could do is just run this kind of overnight. And the good thing about it as well is that you could then target this. So you may have finance data, and the finance data you want to send, get me all the invoices that have been raised in the last 7 days, and I want to email this to my accountant who's an admin user, or get me everyone who's signed up as a web user in the last 24 hours. I want to send that to the marketing person so that they can see who's signed up recently. So with the saved exports, you can set these up. You can say how they're going to schedule. And then the other thing you can do as well is that every time it runs, it saves a copy of that data. So, so historically, you can always go back in and download that spreadsheet. And the data that you see is all pre-compiled. It's the data that was there when it was last run. So you can complete this entire history of all of your exports. So it's good for things like audit trails as well, that you can use things like that for. So so that's the saved exports. I think yeah. So here you can, for example, see there's a couple of exports that I've done, and if I downloaded this one here, this would be what the data was at this point of time, not what the data is now. And you can access all of this through the up there through the system menu in this, or the general kind of settings in Preside. Okay, moving on. I think I might have.
Or did you put the same message, the same video?
Yeah. Hang on. I put the same video in twice. What? Bear with.
Live demo screen.
Yes, I can get it back. All right, well, we'll go into live demo mode. Prepare yourselves. Right, okay, so this is our Ready membership platform. If anyone's never seen this before. So so what I'm going to do as an example is I'm going to go into my orders. So what we have here is a whole bunch of orders. And you can see here we've got our kind of filters. And what we added in this version of Preside is the ability to group them. So you can see in here, for example, we've got various groupings. So what we're finding is basically everyone would save their filter, and you have an absolute stack of these appearing down here. And it didn't matter who you were. If I added a filter and saved it, then everyone would see my filter as well. So what we wanted to try and do is to have a more personalized view of that. So if I go into manage filters, so these are all my filters that I've got. And when I then create a filter, so I'm going to create a filter here, and I'm just going to go in the status. And I'm going to say if it's been cancelled. So I'm going to get a list of all the cancelled invoice orders here. So there they all are. And what I'm going to do now, if I save it, then you have the name, you have the one-click favorite, which was how it used to work. You can optionally now add a folder, so you can put it into a folder, and I can kind of add a new one. So I could add a new one here. I'm going to put it into the demo one, and then you can also choose how you then share that. So the global filter is basically everyone can see it. The personal filter is only you can see it, but the group filter means that I can then share this with particular admin groups. So here we've got a whole bunch of admin groups, and I've also got whether I'm going to give those people permission to edit my filter. So there's quite a lot of the time you don't want people to edit your filter, because you're using these filters in all sorts of ways, not just for the data grid. Someone changes your filter, it could fundamentally change the data that's been used all over the place. So what you really want to do is lock that down. It's my filter, I allow to use it, but do not touch it. So so you can protect this. So what I can do, I can lock it, and I can say why I lock it, because I'm an egomaniac. I do not want you to touch it. Now, if you don't have access to it, if you can't edit it, you can still see a view-only version of it. So you can see what that expression looks like, but you can't actually then change it. So demo, there we go, let's do that. So it's now created a folder.
I think you didn't press enter when you created it. Is it in your own version?
Did I not, seriously, did I not click save?
No, you did, but you didn't press enter when you add a new filter or folder there. You need to press enter.
Well, you chose to share
In the
group,
form.
you never chose a group.
Wait.
Probably. Yeah. Make it global.
Yeah, all right, okay. Right, so there we go, it is there, okay. So that's basically the addition that we made back in 1012, I think, for this particular one. I'll go back now to my slides.
Are you doing the segmented filters later?
Yes.
Okay.
I will come back to those. Okay, right. So a few things in 1016 that we released. So small little thing, if you've got a data grid that's got an absolute stack of records in it, then you've obviously got your little drop down here where you can select how many records you want to display. But if I want to do a whole batch update or some processing to all of them, then a nice little thing we added here is that you can select them all. So that was a really useful thing, because up to now, if you wanted to update everyone, put a particular tag on something or do all sorts of stuff, you'd have to kind of do one page at a time and then set a filter so you then excluded those ones that been updated. So that was a nice new thing. The other thing that we did in this version was to introduce the ability that these updates would run as a task, so that you could see the progress of them, and they would just keep ticking along in the background. Because often, if you're updating stacks of records, you're not just doing update statements for all of those records, but you might have a whole bunch of stuff that runs off the back of those, a whole bunch of intercepts. So when this record's updated, do this or do that. So so what we have with our Ready membership one is, if you updated contacts, then we'd record kind of auditing of those changes and things like that. So it did have quite a large knock-on effect. So we now have this task that would then run, see the progress, you can cancel it, and all those things. Now, obviously, with our, let's pause this a sec, with the tasks as well, you can create these as well. So you can create the ad hoc tasks in code. So it's not just through here. There's all the documentation that covers how you do this yourself for any processes you like. And also at the bottom of the data grid.
Check that you're recording. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
We can edit that out. hold on, lost my. Where was I?
Sorry.
Yes. So also what we added at this stage as well is that you can add extra fields at the bottom of the data manager grid. So we have these, for example, that you might want to have other actions than just batch update. So you could then add your extra buttons as well at that stage, and that would apply also to those records you selected. So you have those not just at the top, but at the bottom as well. Another thing that we added in this version was as Preside kind of moved a little bit, I guess, from just being a CMS to being just a platform for everything. The homepage itself wasn't always the page you want to see when you logged in. So as part of this release to Preside, what we did as well was the ability under your little face, and I think you have to enable this, you can make this your homepage. So once you make this your homepage, then when you log in or when you click on the icon, you no longer go to the site tree, you'll go to whichever page you've selected. So that was a nice little feature, and I'm going to come back to this towards the end as well. So that was another thing that we something we added just from feedback from users.
That's a per user setting. So each user had their own custom homepage group.
Okay, right. Segmentation. I'm expected to get told that I'm not covering something in here. So segmentation, it's incredibly powerful. It was slipped into 10.19. So basically at the moment, when you create a filter, every time you use that filter, it's going to run. If you've got that on a page expression for access to a page, every single request is going to check that filter. That filter could be incredibly complicated, incredibly expensive processing wise. So what we added is, and often that data hasn't changed. So every time you do that request, that data is still the same data. So what we added in 10.19 is a concept of a segmented filter. And these are kind of pre-compiled sets of data that qualify for that expression. And what you can also do is nest that. So you can create a hierarchy, and the child will automatically inherit the settings from its parent. So, so in this particular example, what I'm doing here, I'm doing a expression for a particular page. So you see here when I start typing. There we go. Right. So you can see here, I can select between a segment and a regular filter. And the segment, because it's already got that data, it's instant. We're just pulling back those records that are already stored and who qualifies for that. So it is super fast. And what we do is when you create your segment, you'll say how often you wanted to update this data. So typically it might be once an hour, once a day. So if you've got data that changes on a regular basis, obviously we want to update your timings a lot more. And this just then runs in the background. So
the thing that's also very cool about this is it means that you can reverse it the other way. So you can actually say, in what segments does my contact appear, or in what segments does my record appear, which is almost impossible to do without segments.
Yeah, you have to loop over the filters and evaluate each one for every record.
It's kind of like materialized views in Oracle, in a way.
what you said.
Worth noting when if you have a parent filter, if it gets recalculated, it will have to recalculate all the children because when they're calculated, they just depend on the already saved data of the parents, so they're nice and quick.
Does it do that automatically then if I update the parents or the children, even though if I set the child to be?
As soon as a node is recalculated, all the children will get triggered for the recalculations.
Yeah. And this is in there by default, but you'll only see it once you've created this segment.
Yeah.
So what you need to do is to go into your let's try so when I go back into my orders here, when I manage my filters, you'll see them all listed here. and that's where you start to build it out. Once you've got your top level, then it then appears in your as an option here to be able to select from.
The UI could be much nicer, and I think really want to look at this whole search and filter UI in general, but it's functional.
Okay, so we'll move on from segmentation, right? System alerts. So, so system alerts are obviously full documentation on how you can implement these, and as part of Preside, we've got one that checks for rules that are no longer valid. So when Preside starts, I think it's when that happens, it checks to see if there's any rules which are going to fail, and then it will create a system alert off the back of it. Now, we had admin notifications since day one, pretty much day two, whenever the of Preside, and admin notification obviously go to kind of anyone that's subscribed to that notification. And the point of notifications are really that you know, someone has registered, someone has done this, someone needs to go and do this, but they're not kind of critical. If no one does it, people ignore it, the world's not going to end. Whereas a system alert, the world is going to end. So these are things that you need to pay attention of. And the cool thing about it is that you can code these up. So for example, we have one in Email Center that if you don't have a, is it the from address?
Yeah.
Then, so if you haven't set that in your settings, then it will create a system alert, because you can't send an email without setting this. So it creates a system alert. And then once you resolve that system alert, the alert just goes away. You can't tell it to go away. It's going to annoy the hell out of you until you fix it. So, which is a good thing. It sounds like a bad thing, but it's a good thing. And we built a couple in Preside, and then we've got a whole load of those in the some of the applications we build on Preside. So in this particular one, what I have here, when I logged in, there was a rule that someone had deleted, but it was still being referenced in here. So I got a system alert that said that this is a problem. So what would happen if I just go back here a second? So it starts off that I would get this alert that there's a join condition rule. I would click on the detail. I could see what the problem was and a link to it. I would click into here. Always a new tab. So in this particular one, if I edited, this is our groups module. So there was a rule in here that was no longer there. So I picked once I picked a new rule and saved it. And then once I went back into here, I could rerun the check, and this would check if there's still any problems with the rules. When I rerun this, it tells me that it's now been fixed. So there's no alerts now. So I've cleared my list of system alerts, and the system's now behaving as it should. So it's a super powerful thing. So things like kind of if you've got any payment gateways and no one's put an API key in it, or if you're kind of doing these things that the system is not going to behave unless you fix these things, that's what you use system alerts for, and they'll magically then just disappear once you resolve that. So that's by mistake. So yeah, so out the box, there's two. There's the simple kind of email from address one, which was our kind of test case when Seb developed it, and then the other one that we've added is for the rules. But
the one is kind of worth talking about because it's a tricky thing that I think we didn't really realize the impact it is. If you've got your data models and you change them, you're like, yeah, it's great, I can change my database model because it's a new version of the application. But because the way that the rules filters work is actually your people using the system pretty much interact with the data model. So they may have created expression based on one data model that no longer exists. And those would start causing 500 errors if they're used for like a page access rule or something. So really critical that when you do, so you upgrade or like do some new version of your software, you can immediately then use that to check for what will be broken.
Right.
One question on this.
Yeah, sure.
Are these checks run on a, let's say, general level, or can I tie the checks to certain conditions, like only perform this check when a certain other action is performed?
There's a few different ways they can be triggered. You can tell it to run on startup, run on a schedule. You can have it running on you can have a thing that will say, yes, I want to run this, and it's going to say, run it against a query of objects. So you might have 10 sort of payment setups that you want to check each one in turn and run against those. But your code can say, I want to, you can sort of then filter that down to say which one it's going to run against. Yes, there are different ways of triggering it.
So for example, I would say in the new setup system, when the user tries to add a record in a specific data model, only then run the first check if a certain setting is set, because that setting is only needed for this. A system that doesn't touch this doesn't need the system alert.
I think there's a thing in there which says, is this check enabled?
There's that, but I think
So-
it would be more of a trigger. So
Yeah.
you can manually run the check in your code. So you can and there are some options for kind of standard.
But they're not manually run, yeah.
And you can
also can replicate as well. So it has-
yeah. Okay, so maybe
it doesn't match, right?
which makes them
We said there was an option there that it can run when you change the code as well.
Yes.
standard one.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, so the things that trigger it are startup, schedule, when a system setting is updated, or triggered by code. So yes, you can just say, run this system check. Cool.
Okay, I'll move on to a tiny little thing. So this was a little thing that we just added into the email newsletter. So previously, so this is kind of old Preside. If you've got a whole bunch of newsletters, if you're regularly using Preside to send out kind of monthly newsletters, then you had no idea when they were created. You had no idea when they were sent. So in this particular case, you've only got one, but now you can see there's a date last sent column, and there's also a date modified column. The calculation of the date last sent was kind of complicated because it depends on, it's not kind of uniform. Because you could send things multiple times, and but it doesn't include things that are triggered as well. So that was a tiny little change that we did for emails. I was going to finish on one of my favorite things, which I'm hoping Jan's not going to cover. Are you going to cover this?
All good.
Are you sure? I don't want to. I love the admin dashboards. So this is an open source extension. So do download it. We made a whole bunch of modifications to this. This has existed for quite a few years, but some point over the last 4 years, and I can't remember exactly when, there was a whole bunch of changes that we made to it. So I'll show you kind of how you can use this. So once you've installed the extension, you go up in here in the Spanner menu, you'll see kind of admin dashboards. So the idea being you can create a dashboard, you can create any number of dashboards, and you can set who can see that dashboard, who can edit that dashboard, and inside that dashboard, you can add widgets. Now, there's a widget built in, which is a filter view widget, and then you can programmatically create any widgets you like. So Pixelate, we've got some kind of, we've got a whole bunch of graphing widgets based on kind of data metrics. The one that comes out of the box, which I think is super useful, is just a filter widget. So all this does, you get by default a list of all of the objects in the system. So you can just select one of those, and you can then apply an optional filter to that object. And then you also get to see what grid fields are in that object as well. And then you can choose which ones you want to see there. So, and you can see it's all kind of dynamically changed as I pick a different object. So give it a bit of a widget title, and then that's it. And then you just okay it, and there it is. So you can create as many of these onto your dashboard as you like, and just using that one filter widget in lots of different contexts gives you that kind of single view of how your system's running, which is really useful. So you can see here, I'm just going to add another one, and here we've got a couple of extra ones, but again, I'm just going to use the filter results one, which is kind of out of the box really. So in this,
yourself again, mousing over the other.
I was tempted to record those. So you click on the config. Again, you just pick another one, same object, different object, apply a filter, that apply select some grid fields. And then when you then click through onto those, you then go to that particular page in Preside to see the details of it. So so super useful. You can drag and drop that around as well. And you've got some configuration over how many columns you display. So by default, it'll have 2 columns, but you can change it to have 1 column. And in combination with the set in the homepage, I think is super powerful. So the idea being that when you log in, you don't want to see the site tree or just some random page. You could go to your own dashboard, and that tells you the stuff which is important for you or for users as well. So you could, create a whole bunch of dashboards, assign those to different members who use Preside so that they see the stuff that's important to them. So you can see how I'm building it out here. So yeah, really nice. And you can, as I said earlier, you can permission these. So you can create a dashboard that you set up, you maintain, you give your users, your admin users, just view access to it. Now, we are going to be making some tweaks to this soon as well. So this isn't kind of the end of the road that we're doing for the admin dashboards. There is going to be some ongoing work on here as well. So and it's quite easy. I'm saying it's quite easy. I've got no idea. Let's say it's quite easy to build some dashboard widgets. And if you wanted to open source those as well, then we can start to build up a whole kind of collection of widgets that would be super useful for use within these. And presumably
might get more complicated in the next iteration when we think about dashboards living in a particular context. So the dashboard that you embed in a particular record, then all of the widgets need it's a contact and it's this record. But they are quite straightforward otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I finished a bit early.
Is it also going to show metrics today?
That's a closed source.
Is that weird?
Did you just open source?
We've just teased it a good way. It was one open source and then show it.
I can show it. All right.
A lot of things we really
All right. Let me show you metrics then, because it's so.
They're quite cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna sit down for this. Okay.
Especially if you're going to look at the snapshot. That's not.
Yeah, see, it's very powerful. So what we have, it's another extension which it's got its kind of own component, but it then has a bunch of dashboard widgets. Those ones that you can see that you can then embed into your widgets. So if I go into here, we see you have metrics. So what I can do here is that you can programmatically define some metrics that appear by default. So developers can create them, or you can have them that they're custom and then you can create them as well. So you can kind of have them, some that are just there out of the box, and ones that are custom. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a metric. And just like the filter, so your source object is a list of all of your objects. And you can see in our Ready membership that there's a stack of objects. So if I do orders, which is always a good one to start with. So we have orders. So orders in Ready membership is things that people buy. Obviously, I can apply a filter to that. So maybe I'm only interested in stats for orders which are paid. And you can see here, depending on the object, you have different kind of aggregations for these. So I could just say, I want to have a metric of how many orders we get, and I want to plot that over time. So I want to see what trends we have of, are there particular peaks and troughs when people are putting orders through the system? Do we get a big kind of rush in December, and then come kind of May, no one's placing orders? So that might be an interesting stat for my marketing department, so that they can start to do more email pushes during those quiet periods where not many people are placing orders. So I'll be able to visualize that in a chart and give that to my marketing team, who can then see this and then see what effects the things that they do have on how the orders are generated. So that's kind of an example of the count. Or I just might be interested in how much money is being generated in these orders. So so again, as I then select one of these fields, you see, so the count is kind of everything, so I don't need to do it. But if I'm doing a sum, then based on the object, I can then pick a field which you can sum against. So obviously you couldn't sum against a text field, but you can sum against a integer or any kind of numeric field. And it's the same with the max and the mins and the average as well. So I will then pick a field. So maybe I want to do the average order. So I'm going to have the average gross amount and for my orders, and I can also group them. So again, this is listing the fields which are on that. So I might want to group that by the country, because I want to see if the average order value is more in Germany than it is in the UK, or however I wanted to map this. So I could group this, and I'll try it. Okay, next up, you've got how you want to do that. So, so depending on the object might have a kind of a date created field and stuff like that. So we can naturally kind of trend that information. But what you might have is that the data, the object, or what you're trying to query doesn't have a date created field. So what I want to do is I can force it. So by forcing it, what I want to do is that there'll be a task that will run that will then calculate how often. So maybe what could I do? Force.
You take email open rates or membership numbers. Yeah. It's not that it doesn't have a date created; it's that it's archival data that will always be there once it's created. So like an order, it's created and it never changes, versus a membership where it might get removed, it might get changed. And so your snapshot of maybe membership by membership level.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to look at membership status, for example, in terms of how many lapsed members did I have in January, but when you get to February, one of your members isn't lapsed.
Yeah.
Then you want to be able to snapshot it.
Yeah, so if I'm doing a force one, then I can pick how often I want this to be calculated. And then in the background, it's going to run a scheduled task, which is then going to calculate this, store it away, and then I can trend off the back of it. So that's how the force one works. If the natural, again, it's going to ask me to pick a field. So here I could do the date created, or in my, maybe I don't care, my orders one, when it was created, I want to trend the data on when I'm expecting these to be paid. I'll do date created. And then you've got a little bit of control over how you want that to be displayed. So here you can see you've got your precision and things in here. So I'm going to do my unit type here as money. That's what I care about. And I think it's GBP. So I'm just going to add my metric now. I didn't give a name again. Average order value. So, oh yes, right. So here it is now. So I've created that. Now, when I click into it, it's now going to give you some stats. So the average order value at the moment is £4,231. Look at that accuracy. And I can automatically see then a bit of a trend over last week, over the last 30 days, over the last year. Now this uses Chart.js, which is open source, and it's got some nice little things in here that I can kind of click on stuff to not show certain countries.
There's a separate open source extension which includes all the Chart.js. So if you want to include his chart in your own sites, it's available.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I will. Oh, are you covering this later? All right. Well, I'm going to stop there then. I don't want to. I've already ruined half of Jan's presentation.
I was spoiling.
Oh.
Briefly touch.
Did you? Okay. All right. Okay. So you know, this is good stuff. But if I go now into my dashboard, and I think I have one. I thought I had one that I prepared earlier. Let's go into my dashboards. So if let's do finance one. So I have this finance dashboard at the moment, and I'm just going to delete this widget. And I'm just going to add a new one. So these are the ones that I hovered over a lot in the last video. So so what I can do now is that I could I'm going to pick a time series 1, and I'm going to configure it. And in here, I can now get to select my metric that I created earlier. So I'm going to do this one, and I'm going to leave I'm going to group it by that, and I'm going to say at any point in time, and I'm going to make it look pretty. So hopefully, yeah, it might be. There's a little bug in here. I think I have to do this. There we go. So I have to put a time period. So you can see here now I've got that, and I can just kind of add these. I can use the same metric in lots of cases. So I'm going to do another one for this, and I'm going to go still that one. I'm going to do it by billing country, and yeah, gotta love it. It's making me feel hungry. Okay, there's a nice donut with my country. So yeah, so that's kind of admin dashboards and metrics, which hot off the press is going to be open sourced. Although we probably need to stop Alex there. Yes, yeah, so some pretty fun stuff. And as I was showing you earlier, you can kind of drag these around and kind of play around with them. So yeah, some pretty cool new features. Right, that's me done. Any questions, by the way, about anything I covered or anything I missed? Obviously, there's lots of release notes, and there's videos on most of the releases now. So do make sure.
Not sure if most. Yeah.
Most of the ones released from now.
The only other quick thing to say, I think, is that it's not sort of sexy new features, but the last 2 or 3 versions have also been really focused on improving performance as well in some sort of key pain areas. Things like slow loading data managers and some log running queries. So yes,
there's been fundamental changes to select data.
Yeah.
In terms of how
Yeah, from 1018. Yeah, but Russell covered that bit.
yeah.